My ex-boyfriend mailed me an invitation to his wedding, a real one. Thick cream cardstock, gold lettering, tissue paper inside, the whole production. And tucked into the fold in his own handwriting was a little note. It said, "No hard feelings, Margot. Come see how it is supposed to be done. Come see how it is supposed to be done." Chase Renner dated me for 6 years and then left me at a restaurant on my own birthday, and now he wanted me sitting in a folding chair to watch him marry a woman whose father owns half the medical buildings in the city. He picked the most expensive venue in the state to do it, Elwood Hall, a restored 19th century estate with a $200,000 wedding on the books, every dollar of it paid by the bride's family, designed from the first candle to the last spotlight to make me feel like the before picture in somebody else's story. Here's the one thing Chase did not know when he sealed that envelope and mailed it to me like a little grenade. 2 days before his wedding, my company had closed on the purchase of Elwood Hall. The whole estate, the gardens, the ballroom, the grand staircase, the parking valet stand, all of it. The room he was going to stand in and promise his life away belonged to me, and he had just personally invited me to walk into my own building and watch him try to make me small. If you have ever been invited somewhere for no reason except that somebody wanted to enjoy the look on your face, stay with me for this one. Go ahead and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you are watching from, because Chase really should have checked who owned the room before he mailed that note. Let me take you back. My name is Margot Vance. I am 32 years old, and 6 years ago, I was the kind of woman who paid for everything and called it love. I met Chase when I was 24, waiting tables at a hotel restaurant downtown and taking hospitality management classes at night. He was handsome in the way that works on a room, and he told a story about himself that I wanted to be part of. He was going to start a company. He was between things, he said, and he just needed a little runway. I was his runway for 6 years. I paid the rent the months he was between things, which turned out to be most of the months. I covered his car when it got repossessed, quietly, so his friends would not know. I typed his business plans, and I believed every one of them. And there were a lot of them, because Chase loved the beginning of things and hated the middle. There was one night that tells you everything. His car got taken at 2 in the morning from the lot outside our apartment because he was 4 months behind and had hidden the notices in a drawer. He woke me up in a panic, more worried about what his friends would think than about the money, and he asked me to fix it. So at 8 the next morning, I called the finance company and I read them a card number I knew by heart, and I paid $3,200 to get back a car I was not even allowed to drive. And Chase's version of gratitude, the whole of it, was to take me to a chain restaurant that night and tell the waiter, "My girl really came through for me today, like I was a coworker who had covered his shift." He did not pay for that dinner either. I want you to understand, I was not stupid. I could do all of this math. I just could not yet feel that the math was about me. And the whole time, I was doing something he thought was cute. I was saving. Not a lot and not fast, but every single week into an account he did not have the password to, because some small part of me that I did not want to examine too closely knew. Hold on to that account. The thing about a man like Chase is that he needs you to be a little bit less than him, always, by just enough. When I got a promotion to assistant manager, he was strange about it for a week. When I talked about my real dream, out loud one time, he laughed. My dream was not complicated. There was an old estate outside of town, Elwood Hall, that had been a wedding venue back in its day and had fallen into disrepair, and I used to drive out there just to look at it through the gate. I told Chase once that someday I wanted to own a place like that, restore it, run it, make it the kind of place people remember their whole lives. And he looked at me across the table and he smiled the smile and he said, "Babe, that is adorable. But you know those places are for people who come from money, not people who serve it." People who serve it. I was 28 years old, and I let the man I was feeding tell me which side of the tray I belonged on. He ended it on my 30th birthday. I need to tell you how because it matters for everything that comes after. He took me to a nice restaurant, which was unusual, and I let myself think foolishly that he had finally planned something. He had planned something. Halfway through dinner, he told me he had done a lot of thinking and that we wanted different things and that he needed to be with someone who was more, and he actually used the word aligned, someone more aligned with where he was headed. Where he was headed, on my money, in the car I was paying for. And then, because Chase can never just close a door, he has to make sure it hits you on the way out. He said the thing I carried around for 2 years like a stone in my coat. He said, "Do not take this the wrong way, but you were always more of a stepping stone than a destination." Then he asked if I was going to finish my salmon. I paid for that dinner too, because he had, quote, come out without his wallet. I would love to tell you that I walked out of that restaurant a new woman. I did not. I went home and I fell apart for about 4 months. the way you do when someone tells you that 6 years of your love was a commute. But somewhere in the wreckage of that, I got angry in the right way, which is the quiet, useful kind, the kind that gets up early. I took every hour they would give me at the hotel, and then I asked for more. I got my certification. I moved from assistant manager to running the whole banquet and events operation within 18 months, which is the part of a hotel where the real money is. And I turned out to be very, very good at the exact thing Chase said I was born to serve and never own. I remember the first six-figure wedding I ran completely on my own. 400 guests, a bride's mother who cried in the coat room at 9 that morning, certain the whole thing would fall apart, and a kitchen that lost power for 11 minutes in the middle of dinner service. And I stood in the center of all of it, calm, moving people around like chess pieces. And I got the power back, and I retimed the entire dinner in my head on the fly. And at the end of the night, that same mother found me and held both my hands and said, "You saved my daughter's whole life tonight." Nobody had ever told me I saved anything. I went and sat in my car in the parking garage afterward and cried, not from sadness, from the strangeness of finding out at 31 that I was good at something, that I had been good at it the whole time, while a man ate my dinners and called me a stepping stone. That was the night I stopped saving to feel safe and started saving to build, and I kept saving, and now I was saving real numbers. 2 years after that birthday dinner, a small group of investors I had impressed at work were putting together a hospitality fund, and they asked me to come in, not as staff, as a partner, to find and run distressed venue properties. I was reviewing the existing booking calendar we would be inheriting, line by line, the way I review everything, and I came to a Saturday in June, and there was his name, in a cell, next to a $200,000 contract. I sat at my desk and I looked at that name for a long, long time. And I want to be honest with you about what I felt, because this is not a movie and I am not going to pretend I felt nothing. The first thing I felt was not triumph, it was that old stone in my coat, the stepping stone going cold all over again. And then, slowly, something else came up underneath it, something very calm, and the calm thing said, "Well, Margot, look who booked your building." I told one person. My business partner, a blunt woman named Renata, who has forgotten more about this industry than most people will ever learn, saw me staring at that spreadsheet and asked what was wrong. So I told her the whole thing, the 6 years, the birthday dinner, the stepping stone. We closed on Elwood Hall on a Thursday, 2 days before the Saturday wedding, and I gave my staff one instruction about the Renner Calloway event. One, and it was this. Everything on that contract gets delivered exactly as promised. Every flower, every course, every minute of it. We honor it to the letter because the Calloway family paid in good faith, and my name is on this building now, and this building keeps its word even when I would personally enjoy watching it not. That was going to be the whole story. I was not even going to attend. And then, 3 days before the wedding, the cream envelope arrived at my home, forwarded from my old address, because Chase did not even have my current one. Come see how it is supposed to be done. He had reached back into my life to flick me on the ear one more time, purely because he could not stand the idea that I might be somewhere out there not thinking about him. And I sat at my own kitchen table holding an invitation to my own venue, and I started, very quietly, to laugh. I want to pause here for just 1 second. The stories like this one, the ones with the parts that took me years to be able to say out loud, I put on Perfect Revenge stories first and nowhere else. If you want to be in the room when the next one drops, go ahead and subscribe and turn on the bell. Now, let me tell you about the wedding. I did not show up in some spectacular gown to announce myself. That is not how power actually works, and it is not who I am. I put on a simple, beautifully cut deep green dress, the kind of expensive that only looks expensive to people who know. And I did my own hair, and I drove myself out to Elwood Hall on a Saturday afternoon in June. My own staff met me at the door, because of course they did. And there was a small, careful moment where the maitre d', a wonderful man named Theo, who had been with the estate for 20 years and stayed on through the sale, asked me quietly, "Will the owner be needing anything special this evening?" And I said, "No, Theo. Tonight I am just a guest at table 9. Please treat me exactly like any other guest." He understood every layer of that sentence, and he almost smiled, and he did not, because Theo is a professional. I found my seat. Table 9 was, of course, in the back, near the kitchen doors, the table where you put the people you had to invite and hoped would not come. Chase had seated me with 2 elderly great aunts and an empty chair. I sat down in my own building at the worst table in my own ballroom, and I put my napkin in my lap, and I waited to see how a man humiliates a woman for sport. One of the great aunts at table 9 leaned over to me during the salad course. She was a tiny, sharp woman named Fran in a lavender suit, and she patted my arm and asked, "And how do you know the couple, dear?" I said, "I knew the groom a long time ago." She looked at me for a second with eyes that had clearly seen a great deal of life, and she said, And then she said, You seem like the one that got away. I said, Fran, you have no idea. She winked at me and went back to her salad, and I decided right then that whatever else happened that night, Fran was getting the good champagne on the house. She did. I told Theo before I said a single word into that microphone. Small things. You take care of the Frans of the world. The ceremony was beautiful. I paid for a lot of it in a sense, since I now owned the room it happened in, and I can tell you the flowers were exquisite. Sienna Calloway came down that grand staircase, my grand staircase, and she was young and lovely and nervous, and when I looked at her, I did not feel anger. I felt something closer to worry because I knew something about the man waiting for her at the bottom of those stairs that her father's money had not been able to buy her. The reception started, and for about an hour, Chase performed. He worked that room like it was an audience, and every so often his eyes would flick back to table 9 to make sure I was watching him win. Then, during the toasts, he took the microphone himself, which the groom is not supposed to do, and he started a speech that was ostensibly about his bride and was actually about him and about arrival and about how far he had come. And then he found my face in the back of the room. And he decided to use me. He said, into the microphone, in front of 240 people. I even invited an old friend here tonight. He said my name. He said, Margot and I go way back. She is the one who taught me what I did not want. People laughed uncomfortably, the way a room laughs when it can feel cruelty but has not decided yet whose side to be on. He said, No, no, it is good. We should thank the people who kept us warm until the real thing came along. Stand up, Margot. Let everybody see you. And 240 faces turned to the back of the room, to table 9, to the woman by the kitchen doors he had spent 6 years using and one birthday dinner discarding. He wanted me to stand up small. So I stood up. And I want you to understand, I did not raise my voice. I have learned that the person with the real power in a room is almost always the quietest one in it. I said, Thank you, Chase. Since you asked me to stand, I do have one small thing to say, and then I promise I will let you get back to your evening. I looked around the ballroom at the chandeliers I now insured, at the staircase that was on my deed, at my own staff standing frozen along the walls. And I said, I want to welcome all of you, sincerely, to Elwood Hall. It really is a beautiful building. I would know. My company took ownership of it on Thursday. The silence that came down over that room is a specific silence I will remember for the rest of my life. I watched Chase's face try 3 or 4 different expressions and fail to land on any of them. I said, Do not worry, everything tonight is paid for and honored. The Calloway family has been wonderful, and this celebration will go on exactly as planned because we keep our word here. Then I looked directly at Chase, and I said the only sharp thing I said all night. I said, I just think a man should know whose house he is standing in when he decides to humiliate someone in it. And Theo, my maitre d', who had been waiting by the wall for a cue he knew was coming, stepped forward. Here is where the story turns, and it did not turn the way I planned, and I need to tell you the truth about it. Because right as Chase opened his mouth, it was not me who ended him, it was Sienna's father. Gerald Calloway had been sitting at the head table going a deeper and deeper shade of red. Not at me, at Chase, because Gerald Calloway did not build what he built by being slow, and he had just watched his brand new son-in-law take a microphone at a wedding Gerald paid for and use it to torment a woman for the crime of having once loved him. Gerald stood up, and Gerald said, into the same room, That is enough. He looked at Chase and he said, I have spent 8 months trying to understand why my daughter's fiancé was so allergic to a simple background check. He said, I think I just found out. And he asked Theo, my Theo, standing right there, whether the venue would object to helping Mr. Renner find his car. And Theo looked at me, the actual owner, for permission in a glance so fast that nobody but me caught it. And I gave the smallest nod. And that is how Chase Renner got walked out of his own wedding, past 240 guests, through a grand front door that belonged to the woman he called a stepping stone, by a maitre d' who worked for her. Now here is the part I am proudest of, and it is not the walkout. Sienna Calloway was standing in the middle of that ruin in a beautiful dress, 26 years old, her wedding coming apart in front of everyone she knew, and every eye in that room slid toward her the way eyes do, hungry. And I did the one thing that I think actually made me different from the man they had just removed. I walked over to her, through all of it, and I did not say I told you so, and I did not say anything about Chase at all. I said, There is a quiet room down the east hall with a lock on the door and a comfortable couch, and no windows anyone can see through. I said, Take your mother, take a bottle of whatever you like from my bar, and go sit in it as long as you need, and nobody will bother you. It is a good room for bad days. I have had a few. She looked at me like she was seeing a person for the first time all night, and she went, Let me tell you where everybody landed. The Calloway wedding was annulled before it was ever really a marriage, and it came out over the following weeks through exactly the background check Gerald finally ran that Chase had told that family a story about himself that was mostly fiction. The company that did not exist, the money that was not his. He had done to Sienna's family, on a bigger stage, the exact thing he had done to me, and the only difference between us was that I did not have a father with a legal department. I did not gloat about that either. I did not have to. Chase does his own demolition, he always has. I just stopped being the building he did it to. Sienna, if you are wondering, is fine. Better than fine. She sent me a handwritten note about a month later that I have kept, and the last line said, "Thank you for the room and for treating me like a person on the worst day of my life instead of a headline." She has booked Elwood Hall for an event next spring, her own company's launch party. She is not marrying anybody. She is building something, and I like to think a small part of that came from watching a woman she was supposed to feel sorry for turn out to own the whole room. The week after the wedding, I did something I had not done in years. I drove out to Elwood Hall on a quiet evening when nobody was there, and I parked outside the front gate in the same spot where I used to sit at 22 and just look at it through the bars. Except this time, I had the key to that gate in my pocket. I sat there for a while anyway, on the outside, the way I used to. And then I got out, and I unlocked my own gate, and I walked up the dark drive to a house full of chandeliers I had turned back on. The girl who used to look through that gate never needed a man to tell her which side of the tray she belonged on. She just needed enough quiet Tuesdays to build the door and the key to match. People asked me if it felt good, saying it. My company took ownership on Thursday, watching his face fall apart. And I will be honest, that one sentence felt like setting down a stone I had carried in my coat for 2 years. But that is not the part I keep. The part I keep is the account, the one Chase thought was cute. The little bit I put away every single week for 6 years while a man told me I was a stepping stone. Money I saved with no plan at all except the quiet animal knowledge that I was going to need to be able to stand on my own one day. That account did not buy Elwood Hall. It was nowhere near enough for that. But it was the seed of the down payment on the first tiny condo I bought entirely by myself, the one that proved to me I could. And that condo is the reason I had the nerve to say yes when the investors called. So, in a way, Chase was right about one thing. I was a stepping stone. I just turned out to be my own. So, here's what I have for you, and then I will let you go. When somebody tells you that you are less than them, do not argue with them and do not try to change their mind. And please do not wait around to be chosen. Just go quietly build the room. Buy the whole building if you can. And then, if they are foolish enough to walk into it and try to make you small, you will not need to raise your voice. You will just need to welcome them sincerely to your house. Tell me in the comments about the time someone underestimated exactly the wrong woman, and I will see you in the next one.